It's an apt time to turn our attention to the future. No one can really predict the future, but the founders and operators in this room and the creators in this room are busy inventing it. So today I thought it would be fun to share 10 of my predictions for what the future of the creator economy could look like. And some of these predictions are already underway and I'm just forecasting them out. Others are things that I really wish and hope will happen. And others are just complete guesses. And maybe you guys can turn some of these predictions into reality. Okay, so starting off with, there will be many new types of creators in the future that we can't yet envision. So we said in the beginning of this course that there's going to be new types of online creators emerging in the future that don't exist yet today and that we can't even anticipate yet. So 10 years ago, it would have been impossible to imagine that millions of people would now be making a living writing newsletters, creating short dances, or playing video games full time. And there's an opportunity for creators and operators and founders in this room to give rise to entirely new categories of creators and to serve those new creators that we haven't seen before yet. Going back in history, new technologies and societal catalysts have continually created new types of creators and makers, and people throughout history have tried to transition these hobbies into real jobs. So in ancient history, most people never had any leisure time for hobbies. They were too busy just scraping by, trying to survive. But then during the Industrial Revolution, during the Renaissance, the printing press and higher living standards made reading, music, and the arts popular among the wealthy. So we started developing hobbies. During the Industrial Revolution, with the transition away from cottage industries and homemade goods and homemade production, there was a separation all of a sudden between home life and work life, and hobbies became this way to bridge the two worlds, keeping people socially occupied and productive and away from bad pursuits. Then, during the Great Depression, hobbies actually experienced this unprecedented growth in public acceptance. So schools and businesses started sponsoring hobby clubs, and the media, including newspapers, magazines, regularly focused on hobbies. There were even several national organizations emerging to promote hobbies. And it was also during this time that people started to use their hobbies as a way to make ends meet. They were considered a job that you couldn't lose. And so people started making extra income by selling homemade foods or doing woodworking, etc. In the mid-20th century, big businesses started to be built by catering to these hobbyists and providing the picks and shovel tools to people who had different hobbies. For instance, sewing machines, baseball card trading, train building kits, etc. It's kind of reminiscent of how big businesses are currently being built to serve creators. And now today, we're in the midst of another boom of this hobby to hustle transition, where the pandemic has upended a lot of people's careers and folks are looking to turn their pastimes into sources of income out of necessity. And the difference today is that people can profit from their niche hobbies and interests by selling to the entire world. And at the same time, the development of new technology is constantly creating entirely new categories of hobbies. So what might hold clues as to what these future creator verticals might look like? Just as my old colleague Chris Dixon said, what the smartest people do on the weekends is what everyone else will be doing in 10 years, I think we can look at kids for hints about the future of the creator economy. So to quote myself, what kids do for fun today will be the creator professions of the future. I think kids are a window into the future of the creator landscape because kids are so adept with new technology and constantly immersed in creativity and play. And the time that they spend doing things is totally untainted and uncolored by any sort of financial concerns. Thinking back on my own childhood, the activities that gave me the most joy, but which adults thought were a total waste of time, were things like writing fan fiction, making crafts. I had a business making handmade envelopes that I sold to friends and family. I spent a ton of time on online forums, making internet friends and talking to them on AIM and blogging. And there was no money in any of these things unless maybe I put up banner ads on my blog. But today, all of these activities are things that can be monetized and that large groups of creators are actually making a living from. And furthermore, all of these activities are now supported by massive platforms that themselves are major businesses. A current example of this shift playing out from childhood hobby to valid creator profession is video games. Whether they're monetizing through esports, Twitch, Streamloots, or something else, playing video games can now be a hugely profitable career path. So looking into the future, what are the things that kids are spending their time on today that might become creator verticals down the line? So my analyst Lila and I ran a very unscientific survey of little kids and asked them, what are they doing for fun today? And here's a sample of the things that they told us. They are writing stories, developing on Roblox, making music videos, song parodies, composing music, making videos and movies, curating photos, collecting collectible cards, fantasy sports, stock trading. That's interesting. 3D printing things, painting hydro flasks and selling them on Etsy. Very interesting stuff. So perhaps you guys have observed new types of creativity and fun from the kids in your lives. I'm curious what you guys think will be some of the new creative verticals that are going to emerge in the future based on what you see in kids. Wow, I didn't realize that the chat was like blowing up with stuff about my Wattpad. Thanks, guys. iPad art, cleaners. What does cleaners mean? ASMR is interesting. Minecraft city building, Legos, making your house a mess. Not sure how that can be monetized. VR world building. Yeah, super interesting. I think there's definitely like so much more, so many new ways for them to become creative than there used to be. Okay, so my second prediction is around education changing to serve creators. So it's no secret that our current education system is pretty overdue for change. And one of the transformations that we'll see is for education to cater to new types of careers that people actually want. So given that surveys show that 1 in 3 kids actually want to become creators when they're older, we need to create educational programs that actually prepare these students for the skills that they need in order to become creators. You might not know this, but our modern day education system can actually be traced back to the Industrial Revolution. So our K through 12 system of schooling still largely adheres to the centuries old factory model of education. And industrialists were some of the biggest promoters of universal education, and they did so in order to train children for a world of repetitive factory work. So classroom incentives were designed to align with factory incentives, and the schooling system prepared students to be good workers. They were taught to be docile and punctual and show up on time. They were taught to follow orders. They were taught to respect the space and property rights of others. And obviously, all of those things change when the goals are to train independent creators instead of factory workers. So some of the educational components that creators might need to know include managing personal finances, doing sales, for instance, selling to brands, marketing themselves, content production and content strategy, project management, and getting versed in all of the business models that they need to understand. What else? Like if you guys were designing a school for creators, what classes would you guys offer? Negotiation, mental health, managing burnout, financial management, design, coding for sure, legal, poker and chess classes. I think they should also have like some sort of class about taxes and how to incorporate and like all the different structures that you can use to reduce the taxes that they pay. Basic finance, having a vision. Yes, absolutely. So I think schools are unfortunately probably going to be the last institutions to actually adapt their curricula, but new online learning options will arise to offer a wide variety of information and expertise to students. And these new educational programs could take the form of peer-based mentorship programs, educational platforms where larger creators are teaching emerging creators, as well as cohort-based courses with projects, peers, and accountability, as well as maybe a YC for creators, like we had talked about with Blake during the last workshop, which is essentially a cohort-based course where you're training people to become a creator. Another major shift in education is that it will change to emphasize continued reskilling, because the paradigm of going through education once and graduating at 18 or 22 and being set for life is no longer going to be applicable in the creator world. Creators will need to continue to stay relevant, to prolong their careers, and so they'll need to keep up with the latest emerging tools, trends, and platforms. And so they'll turn to various educational resources in order to keep their skills and knowledge fresh. Existing programs are moving to fill this gap, like YouTube's Creator Academy, Substack Bridge, which is their mentorship program that pairs together experienced Substack writers with emerging Substack writers, as well as independent creator-led courses like our own Justin Moore's course about brand deals. But there's going to be more. There's going to be creator schools, creator incubators, YCs for creators, platform-specific training programs, LinkedIn for creators, grassroots mentorship programs, and more. And I'm really excited to see the innovation here. All right, third prediction. Creators are going to be equipped with better tools to help them reach creator market fit. So as we had discussed, creator market fit is the union between creating content, building an audience, and making money. And today, compared to traditional media companies, creators are incredibly underserved when it comes to understanding and dissecting the factors that lead to success. They get like the high-level subscriber counts and like counts, but if you compare the analytics that a creator receives from TikTok or Substack to the events tracked by big media companies like Netflix, you'll notice a really stark difference. So for instance, here's an example of the events that Netflix tracks for its viewers. It includes when you pause, rewind, fast forward, the date you watch, the zip code that you're watching from, the device you're using, when you pause and leave, and if you ever come back. They also look at data within the movies and take screenshots to look at like in the moment characteristics. It's incredibly detailed and sophisticated and helps them to know exactly what content to fund and acquire. And nothing like this exists for independent content creators. Like content creators are basically flying blind and going off of their gut and intuition in order to determine what content to make. And I think they could also benefit from more detailed analytics, including audience demographics, what type of content viewers are spending the most time consuming, which other creators they're following, are they super fans and watch everything, or are their fans casual fans, etc. And the dashboards that creators have today are pretty rudimentary compared to what media companies have. TikTok, which is shown here, might actually have one of the better ones. It includes things like traffic sources, view time, followers, video views, etc. But for instance, Substack, which I've been using for the past year, basically only gives me open rate for all of my newsletters. So in general, creators need better analytics tools to help them create better content and build an audience. Some interesting products that are in existence today that start to get to this include pre-subscribe, which was this drop from Stir that let users pre-subscribe to a creator and support them, as well as this new company that just got on my radar called OddRec, which is a tool that helps podcasters, writers, and video creators share their content creation plans with their audiences. And then from there, their audiences could actually signal what they wanted to see. So they could make content requests, they could upvote things, they could make a micro pledge to signal a deeper desire for a particular piece of content. And tools like this help the creators to know exactly what to make and guarantees that there will be an audience built in for that thing. Beyond that, we can think about all of the other tools that are currently available to enterprises, like analytics and sales tools that creators don't have access to today. For instance, there could be a CRM for creators, collaborative tools to help them communicate and collaborate with each other. There could be a unified publishing tool to push out content to different platforms, centralized databases and dashboards, financial planning and management tools, etc. The goal of all of this being to help creators understand what they need to do and focus on to be successful. And today, talent managers kind of act as this. I saw someone mention Night Media. Talent managers kind of do this today and act as a proxy for these products, but they only serve the very top tier of creators, and they're not as data-driven as what I'm describing. All right, number 4. So monetization tools and discovery platforms are going to collide in a battle for creators. There will be a battle for creator attention. So up till now, platforms have largely stuck to their own lanes, depending on whether you were an aggregator platform for connecting consumers to creators, or whether you were a SaaS tool to help engage the audience more, or to help creators monetize at the bottom of the stack. So for instance, if you were Instagram, you mostly focused on being an aggregator of consumer attention and helped creators to grow and to be discovered. But all of that is changing now. So platforms on the top of the stack are going down, platforms at the bottom are going up, and they're all trying to capture and retain creator attention. They've realized that you can't just be a good monetization tool because you risk getting co-opted by the platforms on the top that are going to introduce monetization. And you can't just focus on audience growth because creators are going to focus elsewhere once they need to actually build a business and earn money. So this expansion up and down the stack is already happening today. On the discovery side, Instagram is moving into e-commerce with Instagram shops. Twitter acquired Review and just launched super follows. On the monetization layer, Substack is working on the discovery experience with its reader. Shopify launched shops, and there's lots of other examples. Platforms have basically realized that defensibility comes from owning the entire creator journey and the life cycle in order to capture more value and to not get cut out. It's similar actually to how multi-stage VC funds are now expanding into seed stage investing on the early side and growth investing on the late stage side, because they've realized that if a company is really valuable, then they need to be the first capital provider and follow it all the way through, rather than risking that another fund funds it really early and they never even get a chance to do it. So likewise, these platforms have realized if you can capture creators at the beginning of their journey, when they're just getting started, earn their trust, and build the right products for them, then you can continue to capture value as they grow. So a quick case study of this is that TikTok has lowered the barriers to creation and building an audience. But for monetization, the creator fund has been pretty paltry in terms of payouts. And so today, creators will often graduate to platforms like OnlyFans or Patreon or YouTube to seek out monetization. And obviously, that is a risk factor for TikTok. I think YouTube is a good example of a platform that covers all stages of the creator lifecycle. The big question moving forward for YouTube is how can they continue to capture the beginning stages of the creator's lifecycle when they're just getting started, given that it's now easier to potentially create and to build an audience on platforms like TikTok, where there's better discovery. The answer so far seems to be that they're experimenting with YouTube Shorts. So yeah, anyway, so all of the platforms are going to compete for all of the creators. And all of this competition for creators means that creators are going to have increased choice, earnings, and leverage. So what does this world look like? I think this means that all creator platforms are going to prioritize monetization and create broader programs to get more creators paid. So earnings is not just going to be limited to the top creators. Earnings is going to be more accessible to everyone. And it feels like every week another social platform is announcing an initiative to support and to pay out more to its creators. And one potential form that this could take is universal creative income. In other words, platforms could actually guarantee some minimum level of income to a portion of the creators on the platform. And this stable income for creators would help to invest in the next generation of creators and help remove that bottleneck for them to invest more in content creation. And this idea isn't as far-fetched as it sounds. Forms of UCI actually already exist in different countries in the world. So in France, there is an unemployment system for performing artists, and this program covers about 250,000 beneficiaries. In Austria, there's an artist social insurance fund that grants about 160 euros per month, so not very much, but it's something. And then in Norway, the country has been granting artist scholarships for nearly 200 years, including a period with guaranteed artist income. If you guys know of any other programs like this, please share them in the chat because I'm trying to do research into this right now. Ireland too, very interesting. So moving into the digital world, why would it be a good idea for platforms to consider implementing a UCI program? Do you guys have any thoughts? Reduce stress of constant output, more and better content. Yeah, creators will stick around the platform, maybe partially out of loyalty. It'll attract creators earlier in the journeys, creating a moat so creators don't switch. Yeah, absolutely. It will help the long tail, incentive to innovate rather than to fall into trends. I think these are all really great reasons. So in general, I would say implementing a UCI program doesn't just need to be done. It's not just done out of altruism. It can actually drive real business goals. And these business outcomes that could be driven would include things like being the starting point for creators in their careers. So being the first platform that creators choose to go to because there is this incentive program, there's a guaranteed income. It would also minimize the risk that they churn and go elsewhere for monetization. And then the last reason is really similar to all the arguments for UBI. It would actually free up creators to create more. They would potentially be more creative. They would be less stressed out. They could actually devote more energy to just being creative. In terms of what this could actually look like for platforms, it could take the form of a recurring stipend to creators for a set amount of time. It could actually be comprised of in-kind benefits like healthcare and equipment and legal protection. The funding mechanisms could take the form of top-tier creators subsidizing emerging creators. So for any platform that has a rev share take rate today, the way that it could work is that most of the revenue is coming from the top creators. And so the platform could allocate some of that revenue to emerging creators on the platform. And then the platform could just take some of its own revenue and fund emerging creators. I think the biggest open questions are how to identify the segment of creators for whom this would be the most applicable and would actually result in the most marginal impact, like who is the right person to give this guaranteed income to. And then also how to continue to incentivize creators to grow. Like if they're being paid a universal creative income, how would you actually incentivize them to graduate from that program and become a successful creator on their own without just receiving the stipend? There's a few quasi-UCI programs already out there in the world. So TikTok has the Creator Fund, Snap has Spotlight, and Substack is paying advances and providing legal protection for some of the top writers on the platform. There are also things happening ad hoc that aren't really publicized. So remember how in our AMA with Kevin Lin from Twitch, he mentioned that Twitch would sometimes just buy and gift equipment to creators who needed a better streaming setup. But regardless of which one you're looking at, none of the current solutions are really perfect, and all of them have their limitations. Notably, they're all correlating payments with success on the platform. You get paid more if you're more successful on the platform. So it's not really benefiting the long tail and the emerging creators. And it's also unclear on all of these platforms how you would actually qualify or get any sort of payments. Stepping back from UCI, in general, for platforms, the way that I hope to see them supporting the middle class of creators and competing for creators in general is to create a path for all aspiring creators to earn something from the platform. In other words, to contribute to the creator's multi-SKU income. I don't think it's realistic to expect that there will be a middle class of creators earning a middle class income fully from that one single platform. Like, I don't think 60% of YouTube channels are going to be making a full-time living just from YouTube. Same with Instagram, same with all of the platforms. But I think if you're a serious creator investing time into a platform, then there should be a way for everyone to earn something. And I think this will need to happen given the fierce competition for creators' attention. SKU is stock keeping unit. So it's like one of the ways that creators can make money is by offering a SKU. So a SKU could be merchandise, advertising revenue, subscription revenue, etc.
Cool. Lee, before we move on to the next section, we have 2 questions on Slack.
Okay.
Yep. First one is from Evan Zoe. Evan, you want to come on off mute? And then after Evan will be Maurice Eisenman.
Yeah, this goes back a few points, but there was a slide around platforms getting into monetization and monetization platforms getting into audience growth.
Right.
I remember Patreon tried to get into audience growth, but then they ended up scrapping it. I'm just curious, like, if you happen to know why.
They're getting back into audience growth. Yeah. I'm not entirely sure why they decided to scrap it in the first place. Like, I think for all creators, there's a bit of insecurity with the value proposition of like helping audiences discover new creators, because there's the perception that like if you were directly responsible for this fan joining Patreon, and then Patreon advertises discovery and helps that fan to discover new creators, then could that cannibalize your own revenue stream from that particular fan? So that might have led to it. Like, I think when Substack launched the Reader, there was concerns from writers around like, is this going to bring down my open rates if Substack is going to show them so many more newsletters that aren't mine?
Great. Thanks, Evan. Maurice, you want to ask your question?
Yeah, so the examples you showed of the UCI were right now all focused by governments, like local governments. So my question to you is like, realistically, like where do you see like potential for an actual UCI to be existed? Should we focus on our efforts and governments doing that as kind of a safety net for creators? Or do you think the onus falls on platforms to do this?
I don't think the US government has the political will to actually make UCI happen, or UBI. Like, I think if we can't make UBI happen, then we're not going to fund artists either. I think the onus will fall on platforms to create some sort of guaranteed minimum income for its creators. And I think we're already moving in that direction, given all the recent announcements about new creator monetization features, new ways to monetize, etc. I feel like it's, in my mind, I think it's inevitable before one of these platforms decides just to take a chunk of its balance sheet and start funding creators, because like that is where you become so much more compelling to emerging creators, is when there's like a guarantee of income stability.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, let's continue. Okay, so delving further into the economy side of the creator economy, recently there's been lots of buzz about creator financing and ways to invest in creators. And I think this is only going to accelerate moving forward, with more options for creators to access capital and for shareholders to get upside in creator success. In December, Mr. Beast sent this tweet out, which captures a rising interest in investing in creators. He said, "I wish there was a way to invest in social media influencers. I don't know anything about the stock market and I find it boring." So he basically said that he wished that there was a new asset class of being able to invest in content creators, and furthermore, that they had more interest and emotional resonance than just investing in a business. To understand this idea of creator financing and creator investing, I think it's best to start with the financial needs of creators themselves. So traditional sources of capital are really tough for most creators to access, given their unstable, lumpy incomes and their lack of traditional employment. Jack Conte from Patreon has talked about his experience buying a home and trying to get a mortgage when he was purchasing the home. And the bank wanted to see his pay stubs. And at the time, he was an indie musician with a band. So he sent in his iTunes sales reports, which were not sufficient to get the loan. And this ultimately led to them creating Patreon Capital. Here are the various points in time at which creators might actually need capital. So when they're getting started, they might want to purchase education and classes, for instance, learning how to edit a podcast or edit a video, or they might want to buy equipment to be able to up-level their content creation, or they might just need to free up their time by, for instance, getting childcare so that they can actually create more. When creators are growing, there's a need to smooth out their lumpy income, borrow against future earnings. They need to have security against emergencies. And in America, they'll also need to buy health insurance out of pocket when they go full-time into content creation and leave their jobs. And then when it comes to scaling, they could use capital for hiring and expanding their teams. They could expand their content to different platforms, use the capital for launching digital products or physical products, etc. Here's a sample of the different creator financing solutions that are available today. It's a pretty fragmented, sparse ecosystem of content and platform-specific financing solutions, ranging from book advances that publishers will give, to recording advances from music labels, to podcast funding, to Substack giving advances to authors on the platform. And these existing solutions obviously don't do much to democratize investing on either side of the market. There's no open access for fans or investors to invest in the creators they like, nor is there open access on the creator side to really be able to access this capital. For most of these programs, the platforms or the programs themselves are hand selecting and picking people who are eligible. Here's an interesting case study of how a business is approaching creator financing in the baseball world. So Big League Advance is a business that was founded by a former professional baseball player, Michael Schwimmer, and he raised a fund of $156 million to give minor league baseball players an upfront sum of money in exchange for an equity ownership percentage in their future professional baseball contracts. And they were recently in the news this week because they had a big win when one of their contracted players, named Fernando Tatis, I don't really understand baseball, he signed a $340 million contract for 14 years, which was going to represent a huge win for this business. And similar to creators, baseball is really hits driven. There's a very small chance that you'll one day end up in the major league, and that player needs to be in the major leagues for 4 to 6 years just for Big League Advance to break even on that upfront payment. And the CEO of this business said that the reason why he started this company was based on his own experiences of witnessing really talented players living in 600-foot apartments with air mattresses in them. And he said that like Big League Advance will basically provide that player with desperately needed funds up front before they actually make it big. However, this model, this entire premise of investing in players at the beginnings of their careers and this entire business is really controversial for a few reasons. Can anyone guess why it's controversial? Travis, tell me why it's indentured servitude.
Well, it just definitely is probably very prone to exploitation, and folks. I know, like in basketball, there's a lot of folks who sign contracts early, or like with Dave Chappelle and him signing this contract with Comedy Central, where you don't fully understand the scope of what you're signing, and it can really just have long-term impacts that you just don't understand because it's not your forte.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. Maurice, what do you mean by conflict of interest?
What I mean to say is that imagine they own significant pieces of equity in two players. One is up for a contract renewal in like 2 months and is about to play is the pitcher, and the other one is the batter at a very important game. Because they own pieces of they own like voting rights, so to say. There's a lot of potential for conflict of interest in the league for this.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So basically, I think that you guys are spot on. A lot of the criticism comes from this sort of sense that it's somehow taking advantage of younger players whose options are pretty limited at that point in their lives. And there's also this there's also this perception that the investors are usually like very well-heeled, wealthy white guys, while a lot of their clients are young, poor, Hispanic, and lack any sort of formal education. So it just reinforces this concern that there's this business relationship, but there's a really large power and education imbalance in that relationship. So I think a lot of the questions that case raises are reminiscent of a lot of the discussions that we're having about creator financing as well. So here's a starting list of what different forms of investing in creators could look like. There could be an ISA program where you're paying back some portion of your future income for a certain period of time. Recently, I was in a Clubhouse discussion with Sam Lesson from Slow Ventures, who's actually exploring a forever ISA in creators, like giving an upfront sum of money to creators in exchange for a forever portion of their future creative income, which is interesting. You could offer merchant cash advances. This is what Patreon Capital is doing. So merchant cash advance is technically not a loan, but they're giving you an upfront sum of cash in exchange for a slice of the future sales. And if you don't make those sales, you don't owe anything. There's creator equity. You could do token sales with social tokens. An interesting example of this earlier last year was a founder named Alex Mazmaj actually raised $20,000 via an initial Alex offering with his tokens in order to support him moving to San Francisco to pursue a career in crypto. And there was an income sharing agreement as part of this initial Alex offering, where 15% of the income that he made for the next 3 years would be distributed back to the token holders. And NFTs can also be a form of investing in creators and funding their creative endeavors. Throughout history, the way that artists in the physical world have often funded their lives is by selling their work. And NFTs allow creators in the digital world to also fund themselves. And then lastly, you have your classic debt and loans, which are especially applicable to creators with recurring, predictable revenue streams. There's lots of challenges of investing in creators. I think the biggest question a lot of this raises is, if you're just investing in a person, what does an exit event look like? Like, how does the investor ever actually get a return? There's the moral hazard issue of like, how do you keep creators motivated if they're getting a big upfront sum of money? Like, could they just take that and retire and stop creating? There's also increased creator stress and pressure due to taking external investment. This happens to founders of startups too. If they're raising a big round, then there's added pressure to return that investor capital. There's the question of creative freedom, similar to the incentive problem in baseball. Like, if you have external investors, that raises the questions about how much creative control they actually have. There's also questions on how long can these creators' careers actually last? Right now, it seems like creators' productive career lifetimes are actually shortening because of algorithms. So whereas before celebrities could actually be productive for many years and have acting careers for many years, it seems like now with one algorithm change, a lot of creators might just be one day away from becoming potentially irrelevant. And then lastly, do creators have a vision for their business? And if you're funding a creator, how are they actually planning to use the funds? And lastly, cancellation risk. It's a risky asset class to invest in a single person, especially because they're in the public eye. They might just get canceled. All right, so we're going to do a breakout discussion and actually discuss this a little bit more in depth with small groups of folks. So I'm going to break you guys into breakout discussions, and we're going to, well, first you guys will introduce yourselves quickly, but then you'll think about a segment of creators for whom capital is a bottleneck, and then recommend a way to actually finance and invest in these creators and talk about how that would work. And then when we come back, you'll nominate a appointed person to share your takeaways. Cool. All right, have fun, guys.
Make sure you click join. And I also shared the breakout in the notes in the chat.
Have a representative. Yeah, you guys know the drill. Please type your names in the chat. All right. Let's see. Let's start with Andrea Mazzi.
Hi. I wasn't prepared to go first, but here I go. So we sort of ran out of time, so this isn't fully baked, but we were really interested in that life stage from a YouTube perspective, which is like you've established some kind of an audience, you have maybe one repeatable format that people come to you for, but you can't really level up without spending more money, which I do think is a stage that a lot of YouTubers get to. And, you know, we see more and more, it's about giveaways and it's about stunts, and it's sort of hard to compete at that level without some kind of funding. So this is specifically addressing, I would say, the creator middle class to, it's trying to get them to segue to the next level. So one thing we talked about, and we were trying to figure out if there was a crypto angle here, so James might have to help me, but we talked about, instead of funding the creator, which we all think is kind of icky, if you can somehow fund creator IP, this could also help extend the life cycle of the creator. So if they come up with a concept that you're funding and they age out of it, you know, could they continue to make money if that becomes like a show format or something else that could make money with other creators in it at a later stage? So that was one of the ideas we have.
Okay, so actually funding them to make a certain piece of content, not just as a person.
Right, finding a repeatable format, not just an individual.
Got it. And would the idea be that the investor would get paid for like a percentage of the future revenue streams of this piece of content?
Exactly, and the creator could get paid if this ends up carrying on past their life cycle.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, that was actually the original idea behind Patreon, was because Jack maxed out all of his credit cards paying for this crazy music video for one of his songs. He designed like a bunch of robots and constructed them and spent like $15,000 on this music video. And then his YouTube AdSense revenue ended up being like $200. And so he was like, there needs to be a better way for my fans to actually be able to support me and for me to not just count on ad revenue.
Yeah,
So,
and I think like a single individual, it's hard to make repeated, I mean, a single individual video, it's hard to make repeated revenue off of, but a series of videos certainly has a sustainable path to revenue. So that was sort of.
Yeah, cool. Great idea. So next I'll go to Felipe.
Hey, we were thinking about new digital creators in the developing world and whether microfinance would work the same way as it has worked traditionally. So in traditional microfinance, default rates are super low, even if there's no collateral, and there's a bunch of alternative ways of doing that with prepaid phone credit information and whether you're a woman in your country and things like that. The question is if creators would also have the same behavior. And if they would, once they have cash flow, you could start sort of doing the Square Capital route, just micro. Doesn't even have to be crazy crypto. Maybe it would, but just if the microfinance model could apply to digital creators abroad, Africa, Latin America, India.
Right. And just to clarify, the microfinance model is basically extending like microloans to them. Is that right?
Yep, correct. And it could be pre-sales in the beginning, a combination of pre-sales and microloans, or we talked in certain avenues.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. And then the creators would repay the loans based on potential creative revenue, however they're earning creative revenue. Got it. Cool. Let's go with one more person. How about Vince?
Hey. Okay, so our platform is YouTube. They make videos. Audience size are saying just less than 50,000 for someone who creates videos on the side but can't focus on it full time. Pain points is it takes them maybe like a whole day to make their video. If they were to make a video once a week, that's basically a huge portion of their free time. So how to identify someone is look at the videos that they do make, check out their retention, and see if like there's a high percentage of users who actually watch the video all the way through. That way we can like find a good creator who has potential and is worth this subsidy or, you know, UCI.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
Happy birthday.
I'm seeing all the comments. Thanks, Sai. Yeah, and then in terms of after these people are identified, what we could give them is maybe money, maybe like software packaging that's cheaper, that's like a partnership with YouTube, or connecting them with like advertisers who are aligned with their content type.
Got it. Okay, so identifying YouTubers who are in need of capital for content creation or to like finance the fact that they're spending so much time on content creation.
Yeah, we identified like the biggest pain point for them is just opportunity cost of their time, and they probably have full-time jobs and they're not going to make as much on YouTube right away. So how do we make it more worth it for them to just make it more likely that they can focus on this and want to focus on this? So it's full-time.
Yeah, makes sense. All great ideas. Okay, so let's continue. Okay, yeah, let's continue.
Just want to plug, since we only got to 2 or 3 people, it'd be great if everyone could share their answers in the Slack.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
We created a new channel called Breakout
Share Out.
Yes. Breakout Share Out. Would love to hear your ideas. Actually, this is actually one of the homework options for this week. If you guys want to just elaborate on these ideas a little bit more about how to invest in creators. So you can sort of unpack the ideas that you had today or come up with something new. All right, onwards. So my next prediction is basically that there's going to be new models that emerge that blend the state of being an employee and being an independent creator. And I want to approach this topic from both sides, both from the creator perspective as well as from the employer perspective. So to continue this line of thinking around creator financing and education, essentially companies today are talent incubators for creators. They provide a combination of funding in the form of your salary, education in the form of training and learning and mentorship. They provide you with brand name recognition and also a platform to reach a larger audience. But then as that talent builds a following and grows and becomes more popular, the balance of power shifts. And at a certain point, the talent no longer needs the media company or the platform of the company to operate as a middleman. And many creators realize that they could go independent and monetize to a greater degree by themselves. This has happened prominently in the last few months with journalists leaving media companies to start their own independent Substacks. So Polina Marinova left Fortune, where she was writing term sheet to start The Profile, which is her own Substack newsletter. Casey Newton left The Verge to write his own Substack newsletter. Eric Newcomer left Bloomberg, many, many others. I'm a personal example of this. I left the platform of A16Z and started my own fund. When I started A16Z, I had 0 followers on Twitter because I didn't have a Twitter account. And then by the time I left, I had maybe 30,000. So anyways, it's just a really interesting case study in how there can be rifts between companies and the talent that they basically incubated and invested in. So here's a couple of more examples. On the left-hand side, These are the Try Guys, which is an online comedy series on YouTube. And this group was actually initially created while working for BuzzFeed, and later they left the company and now they have multiple employees. On the right-hand side, these two women are the founders and hosts of a podcast called Call Her Daddy. And when they initially launched the podcast, they were basically unknown quantities. But Barstool Sports saw the promise in their content and signed them to a multi-year contract. And then subsequently, they blew up and became really successful. Both of them got over 1 million Instagram followers, and together they've built this really strong brand and a loyal audience that loves the show. And by last spring, it became clear to all of the listeners that business was not as usual between Barstool and Call Her Daddy. And the hosts revealed that they were undergoing contract renegotiations. They wanted more money from Barstool Sports, or they were prepared to walk. And so ultimately, the contract negotiations went well for them. They got their compensation increased significantly, but you could also see the other side of the perspective, which is that the employer or the company took a major financial risk on unproven talent and funded them and helped them to build their brand in the first place. I think creators are going to increasingly see this as a career path of leveraging a known platform like a BuzzFeed or a New York Times, and then going independent when they can get more value independently. In the coming years, these kinds of departures of talent from the companies where they were initially incubated will become more common. So it's no longer the case that people are expected to stay at a company for their entire careers, and creators are going to find it attractive to go independent, and will also have more tools in the forms of the businesses that you guys are building. They'll have more tools than ever to build their own standalone independent businesses. And this will put companies in this interesting position to combat this, to retain their talent in-house that they've invested in, or to capture the upside of talent after they leave. And here I've brainstormed some ways that companies can better try to retain their talent or to capture that upside. These could include a focus on back-end tools and services that the creators might not have access to if they were to leave. They could emphasize creator burnout, and there's a lot of creators who really enjoy having a team and colleagues and the camaraderie that they get at a company. And so the company could emphasize that and support them. There could be internal network effects where it's not just about a single talent, but the company could surround them with a roster of talent and build network effects around them such that it's harder to leave. Like, in order to leave and to still be successful, they would have to basically take the whole crew with them. And then lastly, if that talent does leave, there could be the possibility of investing in them somehow, using maybe some of the structures that we had talked about before, potentially like using an ISA to invest in the talent and to share in the long-term upside. In the investing world, it's common for the old firm to fund investors when they spin out. Like, this happens in the hedge fund world and the VC world. There's not really a counterpart to that in the creator world today. Do you guys have any other ideas about how companies could potentially retain their talent better in-house as the talent starts to grow? Yeah, so rev share, equity bonuses, so lots to do with compensation, profit sharing, offering equity. Yeah, I think these are all really great ideas. So basically compensating creators properly for the real value that they're worth. It's interesting because when I was talking to Polina Marinova after she left Fortune and went full-time on her newsletter, she mentioned that she did sort of the mental calculation of what she was probably driving Fortune in terms of subscribers and subscription revenue. And she realized that she was being essentially undercompensated for that. So you could help creators get compensated to the level that they're actually worth. In general, I think we're going to see more models that merge both the upside benefits of being an independent creator as well as the security, stability, and team benefits that come with being an employee. Today, you basically have to choose to take either like the extreme risk, but also get all of the upside of being independent, or you are an employee with very little risk, but very little upside. And I think there's going to be more models emerging in the middle. Forbes is already trying to pioneer such a model that sits in the middle for newsletter writers. So they recently announced a new newsletter program where independent newsletter writers will share in the upside of their subscription revenue with Forbes, but they'll also have a guaranteed salary from Forbes, as well as benefits, legal support, copy editing, etc. Collab houses are basically an organic emergence of this, where a group of independent creators will actually choose to collaborate together and live together. And this kind of combines the benefits of being independent, but also creates a support structure around them for what otherwise can be a pretty lonely experience. It kind of mimics that sense of having colleagues. And then this is a group that I'm associated with. It's called Every. You can think of Every as basically a Substack hype house. So it's a newsletters writers collective, and they also offer the same features of creative feedback, audience growth, a writers community, just as a media company would, but also gives each individual writer a larger share of the upside in their subscription revenue. So to summarize, both media companies and new startups and new grassroots programs will offer some sort of hybrid model that combines the benefits of being independent with the benefits of being an employee, because I think all of these things will have to adapt to the realities that creators aren't obligated to stay at one particular institution.
Hey, Lee, we have, you have time to take 2 questions?
Sure, let's do it.
Yeah, we'll do Travis, then Paul. Travis, you want to go first?
Yeah, so I noticed something interesting that Stir does, at least in their marketing materials. They say that they take their 10% take rate, and that goes into a creator fund, which I'm not sure exactly what that means or what they're doing that. Like, is this just kind of marketing and psychology, or is this actually like a viable business model?
I actually do not know the details of that program, so I would have to ask and get back to you as to what that fund is and what they're using that for. I think in general for startups, like obviously the whole notion of a creator fund or UCI is a model that like the bigger platforms that have a lot of revenue are in a better position to offer. So if you're Facebook or Snapchat or whatever, you could take a portion of your revenue in your balance sheet and give it to creators in the form of UCI or creator fund. I think startups are more challenged to do this because a lot of times they don't have revenue to carve up and to give to creators. And so Clubhouse's new creator grant program, I think, is entirely VC funded. So I think it can be funded through a combination of like companies' existing revenue as well as using VC funding to subsidize it.
Cool.
Yeah. Thanks, Travis. Paul?
One of the conversations that I guess I had some great conversations earlier with Felipe, Rodrigo, Ignacio. We were talking about LATAM and stuff. And one of the things that I thought was interesting, and I'll bring up my question here, is emerging markets often lack developed advertising. The LATAM crowd often lack developed advertising ecosystems, and disposable income levels are low. So this limits like creator fan based monetization and like ad rev share potential and brand pipeline. What do you think about expecting to see any creator monetization innovation coming from these markets? Or are they like handicapped?
Yeah, great question. So I think every specific country and market probably has its own dynamics. And so I think whatever answer that I give is going to be, asterisked by whichever country you're looking at. I agree with you that a lot of the advertising ecosystems and disposable income is not as developed as in the US. But what I've seen in emerging markets for creator monetization is that instead, a lot of the creator-led offerings there, or the way that creators make money in emerging markets, is through offering something of value. So getting consumers to part with their dollars, not out of altruism or just for the sake of donating to a creator, but actually providing something of value. And that value can take the form of, knowledge and education, something to help them progress in their careers, to help their kids learn something. Like, I think they're willing, sometimes in emerging markets, they're even more willing to spend out of pocket on education because they recognize that that is the only way to get a path into the middle class of society. Versus in the US, I think there's relatively low willingness to pay out of pocket for education. So that's what I'm seeing. Like in LATAM, there's counterparts to OutSchool for little kids. There's a counterpart to Shumalaya, which is like an audio education platform to help like adults learn about different skills and topics that they would need to progress in their careers. There's like a Latin American version of Cameo for gifting and like getting personalized videos to gift people on holidays and birthdays. So I think the creator monetization models there are much more tied to real value.
Super cool. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so continuing onwards. So my next prediction is that creators are going to lean on their communities to do some of their work. Earlier this month, Gina Bianchini, who is the founder of Mighty Networks, wrote an interesting editorial in The Information about how it was unsustainable for most content creators just to churn out content continuously. It's bad for their mental health, and when they stop creating content, people stop paying. So her suggestion was instead to build a network effect, to build a community where people are there not just for the content creator, but for each other. Here's an example of what that could look like. So my podcast, Means of Creation, actually has a Discord channel that is entirely community owned and community run. It sprung up organically without any doing on our part because one of the fans just decided to create a Discord so that they could continue discussing after every episode. So now it's grown into this really vibrant community just about the creator economy in general. There's a community newsletter where different people take turns writing issues of a newsletter. There's a hiring channel with job opportunities. People share readings and resources, debrief after our live podcasts. It's this amazing source of engagement and network effects, even when we're not actively creating podcasts ourselves. These are some of the roles that communities can play. They help with growth and virality. They help with content creation. They can answer each other's questions. They can surface opportunities to each other. And more than that, I found that communities often view themselves as part of the team. They feel like they're bought into the creator's success if they are co-creating and early in the community. And I think new ways to invest in creators and reward communities will only further deepen this relationship. Number 9, creators won't just lean on their communities or their followers, they'll also band together with other creators in order to amplify their leverage. So let's do another mini history lesson and explore the topic of collective bargaining. So unions started to form in the mid-1800s during the Industrial Revolution. Back then, workers used to toil in really terrible working conditions with no protections, and they started to band together in order to bargain with their employers for higher pay, better working conditions, more workplace protections, etc. And after many decades of clashes between workers and factory owners, unions were finally legalized by the National Labor Relations Act in the US in 1935. And then a few years later, we passed the Fair Labor Standards Act in 1938 that created the minimum wage that we still have today, overtime pay, as well as prohibiting child labor. And then by the mid-1950s, about 36% of the private sector workforce belonged to unions. And that figure has dropped to about 7% by 2015. And by the way, that decline in union membership also correlates with the erosion of the American middle class. Today, creators are independent contractors, and under today's labor law, independent contractors are not legally allowed to unionize. But that hasn't stopped grassroots informal unions from popping up among creators in order to negotiate with platforms. A couple of years ago, Taylor Lorenz covered the Instagram Memers Union, where different meme accounts creators banded together for a more open and transparent appeals process from Instagram. Before that, top YouTubers would often join multi-channel networks in order to bargain for higher ad rates and facilitate a direct line of access to YouTube. And back in 2015, the top Vine stars actually joined together to negotiate with the platform about introducing monetization and product changes from Vine. And then ultimately those talks broke down and those top Vine creators walked and went to other platforms. And subsequently, Vine's user base and engagement plummeted. With all of the current emphasis on the creator economy, creators are now more widely recognizing the leverage that they have and how central they are to platforms' value. A new company recently launched to help audio creators on Clubhouse called Audio Collective, with about 40 prominent Clubhouse hosts. And it's part audio creator community, part ambassador group. And they've said that their plan is to lobby Clubhouse for better moderation policies, better insights and metrics, and monetization tools. In the coming years, I think we'll also see the employment classification of creators coming into question, just like how there have been debates around the classification of gig workers and whether they should be employees or independent contractors. These could be some of the topics that creators might discuss with the platforms if they could unionize. Basically, all of the things that you guys currently debate and discuss internally at your company meetings, I think creators will increasingly have a voice in those discussions. Today, it's common practice for product teams to interview creators, bring them inside the company to get their feedback. I think in the future, creators will realize the leverage that they have and actually band together to make demands. And there will be interesting implications of that for companies. And lastly, creators are going to eat the world. So 10 years ago, my old boss, Mark Andreessen, wrote a piece called Software is Eating the World, where he described how software is eating much of the value chain of industries that were widely viewed as primarily existing in the offline world, from manufacturing to transportation to retail. And just as all companies are now software enabled, I also think creators are becoming embedded into the value chains of every industry. And there's very few industries that are untouched by creators now. This is happening in two directions. One is that creators are building legitimate, sustainable, world-class businesses. So digitally native creators are starting their own businesses, and they have this distinct leg up, which is that they have an audience that trusts them and loves them, and a keen awareness of what creators want and need. And this is already happening. So digitally native creators are expanding into various types of businesses, including restaurants, merch, puzzles, podcasts, live events, cosmetics, clothing, and more. And they're getting really creative with their businesses and trying lots of different things. An example is how David Dobrik got people to register to vote, started Dispo, raised $4 million, launched a perfume line, is experimenting with pizza, did the $100,000 puzzle lottery, and most of that was just in the last 6 months. So post-COVID, I expect to see a proliferation of other types of creator businesses that touch the offline world as well, including potentially pop-ups, creator tours, creator restaurants, museums, etc. I think we'll also see new models of incubators and accelerators that will help to jumpstart these creator-led businesses. So the top example on this slide is a program called EF, or Entrepreneur First, which is like the European version of YC. So they build themselves as the best place in the world to meet your co-founder and build a technology startup from scratch. I think we'll start to see something like CF, Creators First, where it'll be the best place for creators to go and to meet experienced operators and teams and build a business that leverages their audience. I think creators have amazing distribution, but oftentimes they need to actually be paired with someone who can actually harness that distribution power and create a business and a product that's aligned with that. On the other side of the spectrum, professionals that are working in fields that aren't creator native will actually have to focus on personal brand and content creation as well. So in any domain with a relatively commoditized underlying service, focusing on personal brand and content creation will become more critical. So the top folks in any industry will be a hybrid of like day job and creator. So you'll have hybrid CEO creators, chef creators, doctor creators, investor creators, VC creators. And yeah, the number of industries that aren't touched by creators is approaching 0. And from a quick scan of TikTok, you'll see plumbing creators, police creators, home renovation creators, small business content creators, etc. Every industry will be pervaded by content creators. just like how every company is now a tech company, everyone will have to be a creator to some degree and adopt the practices and habits of creators if they want to succeed and be relevant. They'll need to build in public, capture attention, connect with audiences, and be good at storytelling. So everyone will become a creator and creativity will have value. I'm super fired up about this future. This is what I'm devoting my life to. And at my undergrad college, there was this cool gate on the edge of campus where once you exited campus, the gate said, "Depart to better serve thy country and thy kind." I'm rephrasing that to depart to better serve creators. And my hope is that coming out of this course, we can all go out into the world and depart to better serve creators. So if you're building in the space or investing in it, my door is always open and you guys can reach out to me at any point in time. That's all I've got for you. You can take a screenshot. These are my 10 predictions. And we'll do Q&A for the last 5 minutes.
Okay. We have a lot of questions. It's hard to choose.
Okay, let me take a look.
Yeah. I was thinking Lisa can go first. Lisa Grimm.
Sure. Hi. I asked a question, obviously, kind of a little bit earlier on when we were talking about the platform competition, right? And the idea that people are going to have to move kind of amongst that pyramid to develop a more fertile place for creators, and there'll be competition amongst platforms to do that. My question was specifically around, given that increased competition between platforms, when do we think that platforms will start to include creator wellness programs as part of their overall monetization strategies? Just in the same way that we see this kind of in the private sector and standard, companies, when compensation packages are more than just, financial compensation.
Yeah, I think they're already starting to actually. I don't think it still hasn't reached that tipping point where it's pervasive like creator monetization is, but I already know of a company that does offer a mental health stipend for the creators that use the platform. And I think that's going to become more common because if you remember what we had mentioned, I think in workshop 2, I think we need to move towards this model of thinking about the total comp package that we're offering to creators. And obviously income is a part of a comp package, but there's a lot of other components that you can distinguish yourself on. And I think we can actually look at like venture capital as a leading indicator. So venture capital used to really just be about providing capital, and that was how you differentiated yourselves as an investor. But now it's like you have to provide capital and advice, capital and BD relationships and advice and customers and marketing. And now VCs are sometimes also including mental health as part of what they offer through a stipend or through referrals to founders. So I think that's a leading indicator of what's to come for creator platforms.
Do you think that that will be, as like you said, it's an incredible opportunity to differentiate yourselves. Do you think that that will be something that kind of lives in the fuller package, or really be front and center with platforms pitches, right? Of like, we've talked about the creator fund. We talk about very much this monetization world. Like when or what do you think will tip that scale to make the conversation around a fuller compensation package than simply monetization? Or is it just simply an evolution over time?
Yeah, I think these platforms all exist in a state where they watch and see what other people are doing because they exist in a very competitive landscape. And so I think it'll really rapidly tip the moment that someone does it first, just like how creator funds all of a sudden came out of nowhere just in the last 12 months.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Great question, Lisa. Mark M.
I feel so much pressure as it's the last class. On behalf of everyone, I just want to say thanks. I think if everyone was off mute, they'd be cheering right now. I had a quick question about, I know Sahil has hired at Gumroad, he's hired some people to do like senior-ish positions, but not like 40 hours a week, 5 days a week. And I wonder if you think there'll be an increase of that. My logic being most people are now in a full-time job. and we envisage a world where a lot of people have 6 or 7 SKUs going on. How do you get there? Will Uber or Facebook have to offer 3-4 days a week job to compete for talent? And will that also exist at the higher positions, or will the person working 5 days a week get the promotion at the end of the day?
So is the question like, will platforms actually employ creators in-house as a way to be able
No,
to...
like will existing big companies like Walmart, LinkedIn, Facebook, everybody wants to start a podcast, but they don't have time. But if they work 3 or 4 days a week, they could gradually become a creator. Do you have to become a creator overnight?
Oh,
Quit your job and
interesting.
go full-time? Or can you stack up 1 SKU, 2
Yeah.
SKU, 3 SKU and phase down the full-time job gradually?
Absolutely. I think that is what people do. There's not like a structured phasing down or up of the creatorness, because you either right now are typically full-time or not in the US. But I think people ratchet up the time that they spend on content creation pretty organically just in their free time. The question that I thought you were asking, which I think is also really interesting and I'll touch upon, is like, will creator companies start to just employ creators as a way to win the creator battle? And win the top creators, their platforms? And I think the answer is yes. Actually, a really interesting example that I recently heard of this was that there's actually governments in the world that are funding creators to go through a creator education program, and then afterwards paying them a salary to create content about that country, sort of like as a governmental PR effort.
That's cool. Sort of like an incubator. That's class.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah,
interesting.
it's I think Singapore was one of them. Yeah.
All right. You want to talk about the assignment this week?
Yeah. Or I can stick
Or
around.
bonus week. Oh,
do
yeah.
We want to do more Q&A?
Yeah, we can do one.
To stick around.
Totally.
Okay.
So we have another question from Cameron, and then we'll do Dave's question. So if Cameron is on.
Haley, I'll echo Mark's statement that this has been really awesome, and thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, my question is, I guess, so, I mean, your fifth prediction is that there's going to be fierce competition for creators, more creator choice, earnings, and leverage. And I guess my question is related to that. I think Peter Yang had a thread today that he thinks a lot of companies in the creator economy space might have to compete with each other for creators' attention, and might have to sort of experience like a race to the bottom, like with Review and Substack. I think Review is they're taking a lower take rate to get more people. So I guess I'm wondering, like, do you think that's going to be an issue in certain areas of the creator economy? And do you have any advice for companies building in this space to avoid that sort of race to the bottom and low margins?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting take. I think the reality, though, is that if you have really powerful network effects, then you are still able to charge a lot. My mind goes back to the slide from the last workshop of all of the take rates of the different platforms and how Instagram's take rate is effectively 100%. Like, that logically doesn't seem like it should be possible in today's world where everyone is competing to pay creators, but they're still able to command that and still have tons of usage simply because that is where consumers are spending their time. So I think as long as a company can be a powerful aggregator of consumer attention and be the destination that creators need to go to, I think platforms will be able to preserve their take rates.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. We'll one last question.
Yes.
Dave McClure.
Yeah, I guess I took this course because I felt like I was getting too old to understand what the hell is going on in the world anymore. And it seems like a lot of creators are definitely on the younger side. So I wonder, seems like it's very possible that creators can start at almost any age. And I know a lot of people who are on platforms way before they probably should be. How do we think about, when is it okay for kids or anybody to start working on these platforms? And is that a good thing or not a good thing?
Yeah. I love this question. I don't have a clear answer to it. I think it's a very complicated issue. it's really interesting that in today's world, like we prohibit child labor, but children can become influencers and YouTubers and content creators, right? And we can also we can put our children to work, we can put our pets to work on these platforms and become pet influencers. I don't know. I think there's probably going to be increased scrutiny around this topic. But yeah, I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, and I think
Okay.
somebody else brought up the emerging market sort of opportunity. I think it's probably going to be a lot of potential for, you know, people in lower income countries to monetize outside their own country when, you know, people who might consume their products online make 10, 20, 30 times more than the average consumer in their own market.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting because being a creator is often just viewed as like an extension of your life. Like it's a hobby. It often is rooted in just a hobby or a passion. And obviously it's legal for anyone to do anything for free. But the gray area arises when you make money from it. Like it's fine for kids to unbox toys for free, but when they get paid for it, then there's questions about like child labor and exploitation, and should they be able to monetize this way? Anyways, I don't have answers. I just have more questions. But I think this would be a fun topic to discuss over Slack or in your discussion groups. Cool. Okay, so there's a bonus content in this workshop that I didn't get to, but you guys can review it on your own time. There's a request for startups that is honestly a little bit not fully baked because I wrote this up really late last night, but you guys can review it at your own time. I haven't validated any of these opportunities. They might be terrible business opportunities, but you guys can look at them and maybe it'll inspire some thoughts. And then this week's assignment is one of three options. The first option, as I had mentioned, is to write an investment memo for a startup using a template that I provide in the doc. And then the other two options are around creator financing. So elaborating on an idea of how we could finance and invest in creators. And then option three is also an extension of today's workshop. So imagine that you're running a large media company. How would you actually incentivize talent to stay? And if they decide to leave anyway, how would you capture the upside that they get in their careers?